Good afternoon. And you guys, thank you so much for this most warm welcome. I feel it. Thank you. And I wanted to start by thanking the organizers of this most wonderful festival, the Salinas family. Ricardo, you've been doing an amazing job. And I have to tell you, I've been on all types of stages all across the world, right? I've been at 2 TEDs, and I have to tell them there's a new cool kid on the block. And it is called Festival de las Ideas. Yes. And I am not easy to impress, for sure. Now, I want to start with a challenge, with you all as my witness. I heard a speaker yesterday, David Wallace Wells, and I have a question for Mr. Wells. And my question is, do you support African economic growth and prosperity even if it requires fossil fuels? So I would like to invite you to a public dialogue. You don't have to answer me today. My contact is there. Please send me an email and let's organize that. I would like to have a public dialogue because I believe it's very important. Okay? Now, I'm going to share with you why this is so important to me. I did not pick this title out of nowhere. The morality of entrepreneurship. You might wonder, what does morality have to do with entrepreneurship? Isn't entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs, business people, just people who just want to make money? That's what most people think, don't you? Well, guess what? I also happen to be on the board of Conscious Capitalism, which is the largest organization in the world of business people, and these are some of the biggest businesses in the US, where for us it is about purpose maximization and not profit maximization. The relationship between those two is you cannot do the greater good if you don't have a profit. Without profit, we all go home. Employees go home, employer goes home, everybody goes home, everything stops. So that's the relationship between profit and purpose. As a human being, if I ask you, what's your biggest purpose in the world? You're not going to tell me, oh, it is to make the most red blood cells in the world. No, you're going to tell me, I want to change the world. I want to make sure that all kids have a beautiful education. But in order to do that, you have to stay alive, hence produce red blood cells. So I hope now it is clear. Now I'm going to share with you my story and why this all matters. I was born in Senegal, the west coast of Africa. And as soon as I was done breastfeeding around age 2, my mother and my father went to move to Europe for economic reasons. So my parents were economic migrants. As I'm sure so many of you have family members here who have emigrated to better skies for a better economic life, and they send money back home. But a few years later, they called me to be with them in Europe. And there, it was in Germany. And I will never, ever forget my feeling of, how come they have this and we don't? What was I talking about? You know, back home with my grandma, when I had to take a shower, I know the shower is not happening now. We have to boil the water, put it in a bucket, mix some cold water, then somebody drags it to the shower area, and then with a little pot, I get to shower, finally. Here, Mom says, Magatte, it's time to shower. I'm like, oh no, I'm not getting naked in this cold, not yet, where's the bucket of water? She's like, you silly, step in the shower. I step in, turn the buttons around, water's coming in. I'm like, what? And the roads are paved everywhere. It's just this easiness of life. But we just didn't have, everything seemed so complicated where I came from. And that question, how come they have this and we don't, became the defining question of my life, the reason why I'm even here today talking to you. The question eventually became, why are some countries like mine poor, while others, like the United States, Germany, and others, are rich? And along the way, I've heard it all. I've heard all the reasons as to why we were poor. Some people said, with a very straight face, still to this day, oh, darling, it's not your fault. You see, blacks and browns, so you people in this room, blacks and browns are just not that smart. It's the IQ theory. Get on with it. To this day, we hear this. Others, oh, if only you guys had access to greater education. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because back home, we have a joke. Most young people who come out of university, their first job is to be a street seller. So you tell me it's more education that's required? I don't think so. And so on and so forth. Oh, maybe if only we give you shoes, Tom's shoes, we're going to solve poverty by giving people shoes. Whatever. I have to stop whenever I talk about Tom because it pisses me off so much. But anyway. So I've been hearing it all. Meanwhile, I'm running my little life, in Germany. Then we went to France. And after business school in France, I decided that France was going to be too small for my ambitions. So I moved to the United States, because that's a country where I heard you can be anything you want, regardless of your beginnings. I was like, I can deal with that. Let me go. So, went. I landed, within 9 months of being there, I landed in Silicon Valley as a headhunter in finance, working with companies like Netflix, Google, before they became household names. And what I've witnessed there in the Valley was this magic, what entrepreneurship is, this magic of creating something out of nothing. It was so, and I just got it, the bug, whatever it was. And I was doing really well for myself, but one day, driving down that Highway 1, I lost it. I had an emotional breakdown. I lost it. Because this was a time where, for the first time, unlike many other times before, I was no longer able to reconcile the life of abundance that I was afforded to live in the US with a life of scarcity that I had left back home. You have to understand, I grew up with stories my whole life of people, young people like me, younger, who packed themselves into little fishermen's boats and they tried to cross to Europe to get a job. And you hear people crossing, and the coyotes taking advantage of it, and all the horror of that journey. And the only reason why they took that journey is to go and provide their families for a better life. What is so criminal about that, I ask you? What is so inhuman about that, I ask you? Yet, all of those people, at least in my case, you have countless young people serving as fish food at the bottom of the ocean, because these boats, most of the time, don't make it, it tips over. And it was because they needed a job. So for the longest time, I had to ask myself, how come we cannot have these jobs we need back home too? How come, why not? And sometimes they tell you about the plane that falls somewhere above England, because someone thought it was a good idea to hide in the landing gear of a plane. That's the only place they could find to hide in, to go over. So yes, I am haunted. I've been haunted by all of this. And so that day when I was driving, I was no longer able just to put it under the rug, like I've always done. It was my coping mechanism. That day just hit me strong in the face, and I almost went straight down in the ocean. My car, I jerked it off. I almost died that day. And the first time I could stop, I stopped on the side of the road. And at that point, I had no other choice but to make a plea with God. And I said, yes, from here on, every breath that I take, I want it to go towards the betterment of my country, of my continent, and my people. And I think he heard me. I think he heard me. He heard me because a few months later, I went back home with my husband, who was French back then, and we went to Senegal. And I showed him this place I came from, and most importantly, this beautiful drink that I've always talked to him about, the hibiscus drink, the bissap. You guys have it as the Jamaica drink. It's also very big for us. So then I discovered people telling me, Magatte, where have you been? Don't you know that, people who have made it, they drink Western brands, from, Coca-Cola, Fanta, Pepsi, that's what you drink. And then the people at the bottom of the pyramid, they drink knockout of those brands. In the middle, my indigenous drink gets squeezed out. And what does it mean? All of these women who used to grow the hibiscus now lost their livelihoods. They have to go to the city and find a new situation. And oftentimes ending in poverty or begging on the streets. This whole cycle of poverty goes worse. And I said, I'm not okay with this. And right there, I decided I'm going to start this business. It's going to be a beverage company. It's going to bring back this bissap, this Jamaica drink, and I am going to first introduce it to the US and do some form of reverse colonialism on my little friends back home. Because by the time we go back to Africa, we would say, oh yeah, we heard, the coolest Americans are drinking this juice, so it must be good. Oh, you idiot, you didn't know it was yours in the first place? Okay. But if that's what it takes, whatever it takes. So that's what we did. And then we went and we started this business, Adina, which was the first company in America at that point, started by an African, that has raised more than $32 million in financing. And at some point, I turned around, and Roger Enrico is the chairman of is the chairman of a board, and we had all the who's who of the beverage industry in America. But it was not always easy to do. The first round of financing we closed was $2 million. As soon as we closed it, my husband passed away. At that point, I had to make a decision. I really did not want to go on. I wanted to let it all go. But then I went back to Senegal after the funeral, because my elders called me back. They wanted to make sure that I would be taken care of properly and not be on all types of weirdo medication. So I went. And there, I made my decision. My investors had said, whatever you want to do, we understand. You do you, we understand. So I could quit, I could stay. But it was not okay with my employees. You see, the UNDP did a case study on us. And back when they did a case study on us, we had put back 4,000 women back to work. Remember those women I told you lost their jobs? And later it grew to 9,000 women we put back to work. So, thank you. So, when I went back, I made my decision. I was going to quit. And at that point, I went to see these women. And I was going to announce to them that I was going to quit. And you know what they told me? They said, baby, we understand. But they said, but your husband, there's nothing you can do for him anymore where he is. But us, you can do everything for us. So you cannot quit. So I stayed on. So whoever tells you that entrepreneurs are only there for themselves, you think again. I stayed in the game for them. So, as we built that company, at some point, you get to a certain size, then, now we think, oh, let's bring in the professional managers, blah, blah, blah. That's when my job is usually done as an entrepreneur, because I like the starting a process and everything. And at that point, I decided I'm going to start a nonprofit that's going to do. And what I wanted the nonprofit to do was just to basically help create as many more of me as possible. Because I did not want charity. I just wanted to allow other women who wanted to do what I did, put back some of our cultural heritage in the consumer brand, and take it to the West. That's what I wanted to support, because I knew how to do it. I knew how to help them. And at that point, because I was researching very well what it would take, I met a man who brought me my question as to why countries like mine are poor while others are rich. And because he brought me that answer, I rewarded him with marriage. He's my husband today, Michael Strong. What did I discover through Michael? Through Michael, he brought me to a world that had words around that which is that I have been experiencing in my journey being an entrepreneur back home in Africa. You see, I just took it for granted that maybe we were cursed. We Africans were cursed, and nothing works, and it's so hard to do business just because, you know what? That's the way it is. That's it. But no. He showed me that the fact that back then, to register your company legally in Senegal, it took me almost 2 years. Compare that to in America, less than 20 minutes sometimes to register your business. In Senegal, you needed thousands of dollars to open a bank account. In America, less than $20. Insane. So, he brought something to me that made sense. He showed me these economic index. One of them was the Doing Business Index ranking of the World Bank, measuring how hard or easy it is to do business anywhere in the world. And, of course, you see that most African countries are in the bottom 30. Your country is in the mid-70s. Right now, we're in the, like 170 out of 200 countries. So what I discovered is that we were not poor out of just because we were cursed. We are poor because there is no economic freedom for African entrepreneurs. Doing business in Africa is like swimming through molasses. And so right there was my answer. Africa is the poorest region in the world because it also happens to be the most regulated region on earth. And voila, ma chérie, this is the answer. It made so much sense. And so you can understand why since then I have been on I'm here. You think, some people tell me, Magatte, when you speak, I feel like I'm in church. I'm like, maybe, because for me, I just feel like I've learned the gospel and my job is to take it around. So, since then, that's what I've been doing. But you guys, understand then how important it is, this economic freedom. If economic freedom can be the path to prosperity, because you're poor if because you have no money. No money because no source of income. A source of income for most of us is a job. Where do jobs come from? The private sector. So don't you think we should make it easy to do business anywhere? And then I find that it is easier for any entrepreneur to do business anywhere in Scandinavia than it is almost anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa. There you go. There you go. Mystery solved. So I tell you here, anyone who is serious about achieving real sovereignty for your country and gain real respect in the world for yourself and your country, you better have a prosperous country. And a prosperous country will be built by entrepreneurs. And for them to build this, though, you've got to free them up. The chains have to go. So don't rely on strong men to protect you. Strong men will not protect you. The best thing that's going to protect you is going to be prosperity. For prosperity to happen, you have to have economic freedom. Simple. Simple. Anything else, you're wasting your time. Wasting your time. So, if this thing, economic freedom, is so powerful that it can mean the difference between life and death. Because if my people had more economic freedom, there would be enough jobs back home, and they could stay home if they chose to, and no one would make this perilous journey to nowhere. Between life and death, between war and peace, it can constitute when two nations usually do business with one another, they think twice before going to war with one another. It doesn't always work, but it's helpful, very helpful. And the last one is dignity. Dignity for man. Man as in human. And here I will leave you with this, why I say that this brings back dignity in people. Because you see, all of this that I explained to you today, my third company now, my third company, and now we manufacture back home. I raised the bar. So when we started production, our products are sold everywhere in the US, Whole Foods Market, you can find them if you ever come. And I explained to my employees why I was doing what I was doing. And I explained to them everything that I shared with you today. And I told them everything. And then there's this young girl, she was 26 years old, never had a job before, because there's no jobs, and she started crying. And I said, why are you crying? She said, I am crying because up till now, I really believed that maybe us, she said, because every time you open a magazine, you see the poor African that needs help. Every time you go to anywhere, you see us poor African and we're needing somebody's help. They're giving us shoes, they're giving us clothes, everything. And she said, and I have come to believe that maybe us Africans are inferior. She said it. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? And then she said, but that's not why I'm crying. I'm like, but why are you crying? She said, because now, and based on everything you told me, I know that it is not true. Us Africans are not inferior. I mean, imagine the power of whatever does that. When she said that, straight back, I've always seen her like this, straight back, shoulders down, head lifted up. Yes, it's not true, we're not inferior, we're as good as anybody else, if not better. Thank you.